Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR Podcast. I'm Pierce Dietrich. You can follow me on Twitter at Race for the Prize. Today, let's talk about predicting hogs at intermediate tracks, or dominators, if you will. If that's what your pronouns are, if you would prefer that I say dominators so that I don't offend you, that's fine by me. I don't care what you say, hogs or dominators, but I understand some people get very personal, and if you don't say dominators, they get all kind of bent out of shape, and that's fine. That's okay. He, him, she's, her, they, then, whatever. Dominator, it's fine. I will say whatever you want. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feelings. I apologize. You can do me a favor, though. If you go to racefortheprize.com and you click on that red box at the top right side of the screen, it says Brandon Cruz DFS. That'll take you to our Patreon. You can support the work that Brandon and I do, just saying thank you and signing up for the Patreon at patreon.com/Brandon Cruz DFS. You can also, when you do this, get access to all this data. So we're trying to figure out who the hogs or dominators could be in race. I'm looking at this data relatively for the first time, and what I've done is taken top 5 laps, top 10 laps at quasi-intermediate tracks, and then also laps led, try to narrow it down, find some names, find some patterns. If you're looking at drivers who run laps inside the top 10, that's great, probably for finishing position, but I don't think this is probably the best tool for identifying possible hogs / dominators / lap leaders. And just the quick example is a guy that runs inside the top 10, that doesn't mean they're necessarily that close to first place. I mean, imagine you're at Fontana and you start a run in 10th place. You can have a really good 40-lap run starting in 10th place, and you may at best get into 4th place by the end of that run. That doesn't really help us out much. But if you're in 5th place, consistently in 5th place at the beginning of a run, you've got a very good chance of accruing some fast laps and also making your way to the lead. Now, maybe you aren't able to pass the leader, which is quite challenging in stock car racing, but you can get yourself in position that you can maybe take another spot or leapfrog the leader on pit road or through pit cycling or possibly on the next restart. I mean, simply being in the top 5 is just one step closer. Top 10s, obviously, are a little tougher to do to get into laps-led hog territory. So maybe you want to narrow your field down. You'll see that William Byron, 41% of the 2023 season, he was inside the top 5. That is very impressive. For almost half the season, 40%, Denny Hamlin ran inside the top 5. And then just stop and think about that. These intermediate tracks going into Fontana and Las Vegas coming up. We have drivers that for almost half of the year were in the top 5. So for half of the season, they had a really good shot of picking up a fast lap here and there, or taking the lead, or benefiting on pit road, or nailing a restart. They were just always in a very good position. These are the guys that you're going to want to consider putting in your lineups that are going to lead laps. It's not necessarily a guarantee that they did it, but you want people that are going to put themselves in positions to be successful. I mean, like, imagine a baseball hitter who's constantly getting himself into hitters' counts, or even a baseball hitter who plays in a preferable baseball park. And you're going to want to play guys that play in course field if you can afford them, as to playing guys that play at Texas. Well, Texas is bad at the pitchers. It still is a pretty terrible. We'll say Tampa. Tampa's a terrible hitter's park. You want to roster more often than not, if you can, course field, Cincinnati, hitter-friendly ballparks. And you want to stay away from places like Oakland, which isn't terrible. Tampa definitely is terrible. What else? I'm trying to remember some of these baseball references off the top of my head, and I'm drawing a blank, which is not so good. Minnesota's kind of between at times too. Detroit, although Detroit is not nearly as bad as it once was, it's not targeted field. Either way, the point is, you want to get the guys that are in more successful positions, and these guys tend to be in successful position more often than not. We can see that 6 times last year, in 6 of the different intermediate track races, Byron spent more than half of the race, 50% of the laps inside the top 5. That's a great opportunity. And even we can look close, like Texas, he was at 48, so that doesn't even get counted. Darlington, 49, that's not getting counted. So almost 9 times William Byron was in striking distance. You want to roster a guy that's in striking distance 9 times, or you want to roster guys in striking distance twice? Now, it still worked out, because when Tyler Reddick hit, he hit. Even though when he hit, he often hit the wall, and so it didn't work out for you. But that's one way to approach picking your hog slash dominator slash lap leader slash they. We can get even more fine with the data, which is probably where you want to go. And maybe we can find some patterns and just look at the lap led percentages. Because really, we want guys that are going to lead laps, not just run top fives. Why not just see who actually led the damn laps? You know, you can look at top five and say, all right, well, here's the narrow. How about we just look and see who did it? How often did they do it? And on the year, Kyle Larson and Ross Chastain at these quasi-intermediate tracks, you may not agree with my selection. That's fine. This is just what I'm working with. And you'll see that in 11% of the laps last season at those racetracks, Kyle Larson led. That's what we want. We don't necessarily need Larson to win, although we do really need a top five. But if he's leading laps, he's got a good shot of getting that top five. More importantly, we need these expensive top-tier drivers to lead laps and accrue the fast laps that come along with them. And we see that for the most last season, Larson, Chastain were up there. Busch had a pretty good run. We also see, we look at this, a little bit of patterns here where when guys get the setups right at these style tracks, they tend to run well for quite some time. Look at these intermediate tracks here for Larson. It's a pretty strong run. Now, he only won one of these, which was at Fontana, but still, 10%, that's nothing to scoff at. Obviously, we would want a little bit more. We want a little bit more laps led. And this is just laps led. This doesn't necessarily factor in fast laps as well, but we would assume that he gets some. Still, and maybe you want a little bit more at Dover, a little bit more at Darlington, but either way, he's up front. He's leading laps. Maybe it's just circumstance or situation that's capping some of this, but you don't fluke your way into leading 10% or more of the laps in 5 of the first 6 races. That's a pretty strong output. And then he goes cold, and then he comes back with an amazing performance at Homestead, which everyone pretty much saw that one coming. But then again, we look here again, the setup for Ross Chastain at the beginning of the season, it seems like they kind of found something here at the beginning and knew what they were doing. Kyle Busch as well. It looks like, hey, they kind of had a grasp on the setup. That's not to say that it's going to be the same names that this year, but we could see similar guys leading laps, running up front for the first 3 or 4 races because that specific team or that specific driver has a better hold of what the Gen 7 2023 car is going to require. See Hamlin here in patches, having decent runs. Tyler Reddick has that monster run at Fontana before he hits the wall, which could clearly happen again. We've got a lot of leaders at Fontana the last 2 seasons, just bam. So again, it would have been Reddick in 2022. Then you got to go back to 2020, where Ryan Blaney blows the tire at the end of the race. And so we see a little bit of these little patterns of guys leading laps. But at the end of the day, there's not a lot. The field is pretty small. When we're trying to identify guys, at least from last year, this obviously can change from year to year. Larson was one of the guys. So if we're going into Fontana and Las Vegas these first 2 weeks, I would definitely highly consider Kyle Larson, regardless of what happens in practice, although I don't want them to go into practice and be awful. And I also, if Larson's starting dead last, although Larson can climb through the field pretty quickly. Now, obviously, you'll take the place differential, but it'll be challenging for him to lead laps from the back. Chastain is another guy that you're going to consider. I'm not sure what we want to do with Kyle Busch. This is going to make or break some people deciding, do you jump on Busch early? Do you fade Busch early? It's not like he's getting into crap equipment. I mean, his car that he's jumping into led 45% of the laps last year, 8% of the laps in all the total races. Just how long is it going to take him and Randall to gel together? I don't think it's going to take very long at all. Hamlin should be fine. Yeah, the JGR car struggled because they had the grills on at Fontana, so I'm not too worried about that. And they made some mistakes in practice, etc. But I'm not really worried. I think they will be fine and rebound. Reddick jumping over to the new team, but that new team led some laps last year. If we look at the 2 races where they led laps, Kansas, which has progressive banking, which has a groove near the wall, and then you go down and guess what? Where's the other race? They led laps Oh, is there other race where Bubba Wallace wins at Kansas again? Do I expect Tyler Reddick to be pretty good? Yeah, I do. Do I think he'll be this good? I don't know. He might. Will he be completely on the wall? Absolutely. So Reddick is definitely going to be Fontana, Las Vegas. Both these tracks have grooves up near the wall. Las Vegas has a groove near the bottom that evens things out. It can be preferable. It just depends. But either way, racy tracks, and that's kind of the way that you want to do it. When you don't have enough horsepower, it makes it running that bottom groove, being a bottom feeder like a Kevin Harvick or a Clint Boyer. When you take the horsepower away, it's challenging to run that line. Whereas if you run the higher groove, you can maintain throttle and keep momentum going, and it kind of compensates for the lack of horsepower. And that's what we've seen over the at least last season, where the high line, or you kind of got multiple grooves at some of these tracks, or you got people running against the wall that in the past you didn't really see a lot of. You look at Fontana from last year. Chase Elliott doesn't really jump out at anyone as a guy that's going to be glued to the wall, but he was absolutely glued to the wall at Fontana last year and put together some 6% of laps led. He had his issues too, though, running the wall. Obviously, Kurt's not going to be around, but we've got the Kurt car. Logano, nice little run here at the end. Not really completely dominant leading laps, but 12% of laps, that's nothing to scoff at, right? So if you lead, let's just say 10% of 270 laps, that's 27 laps led. So that's like, 2 points? It's really not much. You throw in the fast laps with it, maybe that's 6, 7, or 8 points. But you also have to look at that in comparison to other drivers. Ross Chastain led 25%. That's a pretty strong number, but that's the cap, really. So you say, oh, well, he only led 12%. Yeah, but the most was 25%. So he was second in laps led. If he's second in laps led, there's a very good chance that he's winning the race or finishing in the top 5. And he did win the race. So who's going to outscore him? Some place differential guys. If they have a big day, yeah, they'll get there. They got to have a big day starting from the back. But then who else? Clearly, he's winning the finishing position battle. Clearly, he's winning the Hall Point / laps led / Dominator battle. Now, it's going to be behind Chastain. You can roster them both. Maybe Chastain has an issue. But if you have the second most laps led and you finish up towards the front, very good chance you're going to be in the optimal lineup. So we have to put that into perspective, because I know people want to see 43s and 35s and these big monster numbers. But even with this big monster number here for the 45, now, this one's not really a great example because Reddick will wreck, and so his 45 is almost meaningless. But even if Tyler Reddick doesn't wreck out and he is in the optimal lineup, Larson is the next in line. It's only 14% of laps led. But again, we've got 5 of the roster spots to fill. There's going to be some place differential. There's going to be some value. But there more than likely is going to be a second hog / lap leader / dominator / they them. And that would be Kyle Larson in that slot as long as he gets a solid finish. And you can apply that same theory to all these others. Like, oh, well, there's a 30. That's awesome. 18 is not that much. It's going to be enough. We're not going to really see a bunch of races where it's completely spread out and perfectly aligned for 3 drivers to hit. So this is probably more of an anomaly, especially in a Gen 7 package that we have tons of different race winners. We have the tons of different cautions and spins and wrecks and changes on pit road, and people taking tires, people not taking tires, people not taking tires, people taking 2 tires, changing the restarting grid. And so that guys that you did not expect to take the lead just line up in the right spot and get off to the lead. We see lead changes a lot. That's one of the things you see in this Las Vegas race in stage 3. Tons of different cautions, tons of different lap leaders. That's not going to change. I don't see any reason why that would change. Now, I'm saying that because some people are going to look at this data and say, this isn't giving me the answer. It's 11%. That is the answer. 11% of laps led at these intermediate tracks is going to be significant when you factor in this car style, the cautions, the restarts. You're going to see leads change hands often on pit road and on restarts. It's going to be very difficult, very challenging to absolutely run away with races. This isn't 2018. This isn't 2017. This isn't even the 2019-2020 package where it was a lot more static, a lot more constant, not a lot of changes, a lot more green flag runs. Whereas like 16 through 18, I would argue, the big numbers that you would get laps led from specific drivers was more to do with domination of drivers and dominant equipment. Whereas in 2019 through 2021, it was because of the crap equipment and just the poor racing and just everything being locked into place. Well, now you kind of got a mixture of all of those things, and it has equalized the field. It's led to situations where we're getting different guys leading, not because you're passing the leader, but because of there's situations where people are on different strategies, people have faster pit crews, people make different decisions, and they get out to different guys leading laps. But all that being said, we're not getting a lot of random yahoos and strangers leading laps. Alex Bowman with 40 laps led here at Kansas. Seems a little bit Yahoo-ish, but he's stepped up in certain races. I think that'll do it. Hopefully this was slightly helpful. If you want to get access to this data, which I would suggest you do and go over it yourself, the laps led, the top 5 data, racefortheprize.com. That's racefortheprize.com. Please like this video or dislike it if I offended you by not saying your pronoun correctly. I am sorry. We'll work on that in the future. Patreon.com/BrandonCruzDFS. Have a wonderful day. Montana, Las Vegas coming up, but all this data will help you for these races. But as we get further in, around here, Dover, Darlington, we'll be able to look at top 5, top 10 from 2023, and that'll be a little bit better of an indicator. I would say you want to use both those data sets, but obviously once we get to Charlotte, we're probably not going to be looking at the 2022 first year of the Gen 7 data. Adios.